In America, right now, there are towns where children play in raw sewage, where tap water can make you sick, and where houses cost less than a phone because no one wants to live there. This isn't a failed country or a disaster zone. It's the United States in 2026. And once you see what we're about to show you, you won't look at this country the same way again. Pine Ridge Reservation, South Dakota. Pine Ridge isn't just poor. It's one of the most deprived places in the entire Western Hemisphere, and it's on American soil. Home to the Oglala Lakota people, this reservation sits in South Dakota, yet its living conditions rival countries the U.S. calls underdeveloped. The numbers are brutal. Life expectancy is 66 to 68 years, about 12 years below the national average. Unemployment reaches up to 90%. Median household income is just $4,000 to $7,000 a year, not monthly, a year. Around 40% of homes don't have running water, electricity, or sewage. In 2025, in the United States, infrastructure barely exists. Dirt roads turn into mud traps. Families live in trailers with no insulation while winter temperatures drop below zero. The nearest full hospital is hours away. Schools rely on donations just to function. This isn't an accident. It's systemic abandonment. Federal treaties promised support but delivered bureaucracy instead. Pine Ridge has been labeled one of the most impoverished areas in America by the United Nations, the same UN that monitors war zones. And despite that, nothing changes. And if you think this is as bad as it gets, wait until you see the next place where poverty isn't just inherited, it's geographically inescapable. Centerville, Illinois. There's a special kind of failure when you can see a major U.S. city from your street and still live without clean water. Centerville sits next to East St. Louis, just across the river from downtown St. Louis. You can see the Gateway Arch from certain blocks, and yet this town feels cut off from civilization. Population has dropped to about 5,000. Homes sell for $12,000 to $20,000, if they sell at all. Over 40% of residents live in poverty. Unemployment stays above 15%, triple the national average. But the real collapse is basic survival. Centerville has spent years under boil water advisories, wells contaminated, tap water unreliable. The sewage system barely functions. Some neighborhoods have sewers. Others rely on failing septic tanks from decades ago. When it rains, raw sewage backs up into yards and sometimes homes. In America, in 2025. The town has repeatedly fallen under state oversight. At one point, it couldn't even pay its own employees. Police and fire services were cut back. Streetlights go dark when bills aren't paid. Roads crumble because fixing them costs more than ignoring them. A local summed it up perfectly. People drive past us to get to the stadium and never look left. That's Centerville. Close enough to see wealth, far enough to never touch it. And here's the part that should bother you most. Officials have seriously discussed dissolving the town entirely, not rebuilding it, not fixing it, just deleting it from the map. Because when a place becomes too expensive to save, America doesn't rescue it. It erases it. And if you think that's bleak, the next location shows what happens when the government promises help and then disappears completely. Colonia Communities, Texas border. Welcome to a different kind of America. One where entire neighborhoods lack running water, electricity, and paved roads. And it's not because of a disaster. It's normal. The colonias are unincorporated settlements along the Texas-Mexico border, home to roughly 500,000 people. Permanent communities that look like they belong in a developing nation, planted inside the richest country on earth. Life in a colonia is bare survival. Dirt roads that turn into mud rivers when it rains, little to no municipal water. Families buy it from trucks or haul it themselves. No sewer systems in many areas, outhouses, or makeshift septic tanks. Electricity is unreliable, sometimes illegal. Homes range from basic structures to literal shacks built from scrap. Median household income sits around $15,000 to $20,000 a year for entire families. And here's why nothing changes. Colonias don't officially belong to anyone. They're unincorporated. No city government, no guaranteed services. Just state and county agencies pointing fingers while people live without toilets. Poverty rates in some colonias exceed 50%. Healthcare requires long drives, schools are overcrowded, and the land itself is often legally murky, sold decades ago by developers who promised infrastructure coming soon. It never came. Texas has known about this since the 1980s. Programs exist, grants were allocated, but colonias sit in a legal and political gray zone. Not cities, not rural enough, and populated by people with little political leverage, so progress crawls or stops entirely. One researcher put it bluntly, "I've seen better sanitation in parts of Central America than in South Texas." You can drive past a Walmart and a brand new highway and end up in a neighborhood where kids play next to open sewage ditches, and it's all technically legal because no one claimed responsibility. The colonias don't collapse. They're left to exist in permanent neglect. And the next place shows what happens when an entire town loses its only industry and the government simply walks away. Gary, Indiana. Gary, Indiana is what happens when a city is built around one industry, and that industry walks away. This isn't slow decline, it's economic abandonment. Gary sits less than 30 miles from downtown Chicago. At its peak in the 1960s, it had over 175,000 residents, built almost entirely by U.S. Steel. Steel left, jobs vanished, and the city never recovered. Today, Gary's population is under 70,000, a 60% collapse. Homes sell for $30,000 to $50,000, but thousands sit abandoned. Some go for under $1,000. Poverty tops 30%. Unemployment is double the national average. Violent crime ranks among the worst in the country. The physical decay is impossible to miss. Over 13,000 abandoned buildings, entire blocks hollowed out, streetlights dead, roads cratered. The city is too broke to demolish the ruins, let alone rebuild them. You drive past caved-in houses and shattered windows, and then notice families still living 2 doors down. Public services run on fumes. Schools consolidate or shut down. Fire and police departments are understaffed. Water and sewage systems crumble from neglect. One journalist described it perfectly. The city is being reclaimed by nature in real time, with people still inside it. And here's the cruelest part. You can stand in Gary and see the Chicago skyline glittering across Lake Michigan. Billions in development, endless opportunity, all within sight, and completely out of reach. No economic bridge, just proximity that makes the contrast unbearable. Gary's decay has become its attraction. Tourists come to photograph abandoned churches and rusting steel mills. When a city's biggest draw is how beautifully it's falling apart, you're no longer declining. You've been written off. And if a city collapsing in the shadow of Chicago feels grim, The next two locations show what happens when the water itself turns against the people who depend on it. Flint, Michigan. Flint isn't just on this list, it defines it. This is the city that proved American infrastructure can poison its own people, and the government's response can be a shrug and bottled water. In 2014, Flint switched its water supply to save money. The water was so corrosive, it leached lead from old pipes straight into homes. Lead, a toxin that causes permanent brain damage, especially in children. And officials knew. They lied anyway. Flint's population is now around 80,000, down from nearly 200,000 at its industrial peak. Median home prices sit between $25,000 and $40,000. Poverty exceeds 40%. Violent crime is 4 times the national average. This was already a struggling city. The water crisis just finished the job. A decade later, the damage isn't over. Thousands of pipes have been replaced, but trust hasn't. Some residents still won't drink from the tap. Children exposed to lead now live with lifelong learning disabilities and developmental issues. That's not a crisis. That's a lost generation. And accountability? Minimal. A few charges, mostly slaps on the wrist. The harm stayed. The consequences didn't. And this wasn't an accident. Flint's collapse started decades earlier when General Motors gutted its workforce and left. Jobs vanished, the tax base collapsed. The city was put under emergency management, where unelected officials prioritized budgets over human safety. Saving money mattered more than children's brains. A resident said it best. They gave us new pipes, but they didn't give us our lives back. You can't undo lead exposure. You can't rebuild trust once a government proves it will poison you to balance a spreadsheet. Flint is a scar America refuses to look at for too long. And if you think this is as bad as government neglect gets, the next location made international health experts compare parts of the U.S. to the global South. Lowndes County, Alabama. In 2017, a United Nations investigator visited rural Alabama and compared living conditions to the poorest places on Earth. The UN came to the United States and asked a simple question: how is this possible? The answer was raw sewage. Lowndes County sits in America's Black Belt with about 10,000 residents and a poverty rate near 30%. But the real crisis isn't income, it's sanitation. The clay-heavy soil here makes septic systems fail. Waste backs up, overflows, and pools in yards. Installing a proper system costs up to $30,000, far beyond what most families can afford. So people use straight piping, sending human waste directly into the ground. Illegal, and the only option. The result is sewage in yards where children play, open pipes draining into ditches, groundwater contaminated with human waste. And then came the finding that stunned researchers: hookworm infections, a parasitic disease associated with extreme poverty, nearly eradicated in America decades ago, now found in Alabama because people live surrounded by sewage. Federal aid programs exist, but residents are too poor to qualify for loans and too spread out for sewer systems. They fall through every bureaucratic crack. The county begged for help, the media covered it, the UN documented it, and still, nothing changed. One resident said it plainly: "We live worse than people in countries America sends aid to." That's not rhetoric. That's Lowndes County in 2025. And if you think sewage-filled yards are rock bottom, The next location shows what happens when entire communities aren't just neglected, they're erased from the priority list entirely. McDowell County, West Virginia. McDowell County is what happens when an entire region bets its future on one industry, and that industry disappears. In the 1950s, nearly 100,000 people lived here, powered by coal. Today, fewer than 18,000 remain. An 82% population collapse. When the mines closed, everything else followed: jobs, schools, hospitals, and hope. What's left is brutal. Median household income sits around $24,000. Poverty exceeds 35%, and in some areas, over half the population. Life expectancy for men is about 64 years, roughly 15 years below the U.S. average. The jobs that exist are mostly low-wage retail or healthcare, if they exist at all. Then came the opioids. McDowell was hit harder than almost anywhere in America. Overdose rates exploded. Entire families were wiped out. Addiction became the default escape in a county with no economic future. And the infrastructure collapsed alongside it. Roads are crumbling, buildings rot in place. There's no movie theater, no major grocery store, and no full-service hospital. A medical emergency means a long ambulance ride, if one's available. Schools closed or merged as students vanished. The ones still open graduate kids into a job market that doesn't exist. Most young people leave the moment they can, accelerating the decline. And here's the cruel irony. McDowell supplied the coal that powered American industrialization. Cities lit up, factories ran, fortunes were made. When coal stopped being profitable, McDowell was discarded. There was no real transition plan, no meaningful retraining, no major investment. Just a slow bleed until the county barely functions. A local teacher summed it up. We taught our kids the mine would take care of them. Then the mine left, and we had nothing else to teach. Drive through McDowell, and it feels post-apocalyptic. Boarded storefronts, homes that should be condemned but are still occupied. Stunning mountains and forest with no way to turn beauty into survival. The silence isn't peaceful. It's empty. And if watching an entire county fade into oblivion feels bleak, the final location is where everything we've covered converges. A place so forgotten that even calling it a town feels generous. Breathitt County, Kentucky. Breathitt County is Appalachia at its most isolated and forgotten. About 13,000 residents remain, down from over 17,000 in the 1970s, trapped in multi-generational poverty. Median household income sits around $23,000. Poverty exceeds 38%, and in some areas, over 50%. Unemployment is near 15%. Life expectancy is just 68 years. The opioid crisis has ravaged the county, hitting one of Kentucky's hardest-hit areas. Infrastructure is a nightmare. Large areas lack clean running water. Families haul water or rely on contaminated wells. Homes leak, walls gap, insulation is non-existent. Families burn wood to stay warm. In winter, outdoor temperatures barely reach 50 degrees. Roads are treacherous. Broadband? Almost non-existent. Schools are underfunded. Jobs are scarce. Coal mines that once employed thousands are mostly closed. Healthcare is minimal. The nearest hospital can be 30 to 60 minutes away. If you have a heart attack here, geography alone lowers your odds. Local government is broke, patching problems with duct tape and a prayer. As one social worker said, families living without heat, without water, without hope. and nobody's coming to help. Breathitt County isn't on anyone's priority list. No investment, no rescue, just slow economic and demographic death, while the rest of America pretends Appalachia doesn't exist. Mountains, forests, and abandoned coal tipples stand as haunting reminders of a place trapped by geography and neglect. Those were 8 places in America where third world isn't an insult. It's documented reality. Raw sewage in yards, poisoned water, hookworm, entire communities abandoned by policy, not accident. The resources exist to fix this. The choice not to is deliberate. So before you believe the myth of a thriving nation, ask yourself where the money actually goes, because it's clearly not going here. If this made you uncomfortable, good. That means you were paying attention.